We've now come to our last session of our short webinar conference today. The title is Focus on Korea Ship Finance, International and Domestic Outlook and Opportunities, and we have a wonderful panel to discuss these issues. Just to remind everyone on the panel, we have also Mr. Byong-Churl on the panel from Busan Bank, but without a camera. So SD Choi, please, who's moderating, just remember that Mr. An is there as well. Our moderator is Mr. Sung-Hwan Choi, SD Choi, who's a partner of Ince London, and SD, over to you, please.
Thank you, Kevin. Also, I want to thank Marine Money for this opportunity to moderate this panel of my 6 very distinguished guests. On a personal note, it's been a great experience to be part of Marine Money Korea since its inception, and now a strong 15 years. And to see the important evolution of the Korean Ship Finance Forum going from strength to strength. I would like to introduce my esteemed panel members, each of whom really do not need any introduction nor as to their institutions, as each in their own right I would consider as experts in Korea's ship finance market and their institutions key players for Korea's ship finance over the many years, and more so now as we try to navigate out of this pandemic situation. So our panel will focus on Korea ship finance through the purview of international and domestic outlook and opportunities. From the Korean institution side, we have Mr. Jun-Hyung, Director, Head of Shipping and Aviation Investments of KDB Infrastructure Investments Asset Management. I think most of us know it as KIAMCO. Also, Mr. Woo Sung-Jung, Managing Director and Head of Global IB Division of KTB Asset Management. Mr. Byong-Churl, Department Manager, Marine Finance Department of Busan Bank. And from the international financier side, I have Gwenael Delattre, Director, Head of Shipping and Offshore Finance, Asia Pacific of Societe Generale. Mr. James Tong, Managing Director, Regional Head of Global Shipping and Logistics, Asia Pacific and Japan of Citi. And Mr. Klaus Schmidberger, Vice President, Maritime Industries of KfW IPEX-Bank. Welcome and thanks to each of you for your kind participation. So to kick off, I'll ask each of you if you can provide, say, any introduction that I may have missed about yourself and also your institution. And the first point would be the past year highlights and deals that you and your institution have completed or are currently looking to carry out in Korea. And also for the Korean panelists, any outbound projects and where you are currently with your Korean portfolios and deals. And again, for the Korean panelists, any non-Korean portfolios. So if I could start with Jun-Hyung of KDB KIAMCO.
Hi, thanks for introduction. Hi everyone. I'm Jun-Hyung. I worked for ABNM the last 11 years. Most of the audience probably we met while I'm staying in Singapore. I came back to Korea 2 years ago, and now I'm heading overseas investment division of KIAMCO, KDB Infrastructure. And KIAMCO, at the moment, we have asset under management worth of $13 billion dollars asset. And then the asset covers many energy sector, infrastructure, social infrastructure, private debt, and then the shipping as well. So And then, yeah, we have about 10 billion worth of assets under management invested in Korea. And then we have $3 billion worth asset investment overseas. Among them, we have about $1 billion worth of shipping investment. And yeah, this year, generally early this year, we started very slow, but generally the market pick up during the year, and we see a lot of deal flow in shipping and infrastructure, alternative asset investment side in general. So this year in the shipping side, we closed 4 transactions, and then we have 2 live deals at the moment. So yeah, it's actually a good year. And then the asset wise, we did the BLOC, BLCC, and then BLGC, and then LNG, and the bulk side we closed 2 vessels, Newcastle Max. So it's actually we are covering all sectors of the ship types. Also, we have some terminals, LNG related terminals. That is not related. It's also related to shipping. It's yeah, logistic chain important. So, but we try to introduce outbound deal, means introduce Korean capital market to overseas ship owners, but still the appetite or the understanding of Korean investors, understanding of shipping market is not that sophisticated. So even though we're spending time, yeah, let's say that we need more time to spend to make them understand. So it's most of our transaction was a local transaction. So we are working hard on to open up the international opportunity. Yep. Thank you.
Thank you, Jun-Hyung. And I think, you'll also be in a very good position because of your storied background, also from your past working at the International Bank for the Korean market. So I'm sure things will get progressed better in the Korean market for just getting more into the education, as you mentioned. If I could ask James next.
Hey, hi everyone. Good afternoon, all the panelists, and thank you everybody for inviting me to be part of it. Earlier this year, our CEO came out to make a commitment of $1 trillion of sustainability financing, out of which it was today or yesterday, it was the closing of the first $1 billion social finance bond, which is part of the commitment of the sustainability. There will be $500 billion of capital allocated to social finance, inclusion financing, and $500 billion that into the sustainability. So that basically is the headers of our bank. That including shipping finance, over the last couple of years. In fact, since Busan Principle, launching of Busan Principle, our global shipping chairman is also the chairman for the global maritime, facilitates stakeholders to really banks to sign up to the Busan Principle to be providing responsive financing to the shipping industry. And from my perspective, I also see that Asian issuers sometimes could be a little bit behind the curve. Because liquidity in Asia is still quite abundant, particularly from regional bank, local bank, and other institutions that providing shipping finance. But if you look at over the last couple of years, number of European or a non-Asian shipping company has already embarked ESG-linked financing into their capex. The latest one that will be our private placement and then KPI link for C-SPAN. There's only one name in Asia, which is NYK, Japanese name that looking into that. I think what I see that international lenders, particularly now, is a very topical time of COP26. I think even for Korea itself, it has committed quite aggressively of about reduction of 40% of the greenhouse gas to the 2018 level, much more aggressive than the initial commitment of around 26%. So I think everyone is really looking into the climate issues in that. I think as a responsible shipping financier, I think that could also incorporate it in Korea too. Particularly over the last couple of years, the pandemic really has affected everyone, but shipping company has got quite a lot of winter profit, and then it might last for another year or so before the supply is going to come in. So I think if Korea shipping finance market could really discuss it even together to put that as a primary objective too, rather than just only providing liquidity, I think that would be something that make Korea shipping in a leading space. Particularly, they have got the technology, they have got the state-of-the-art shipyards, and now you have a KOBC and all the attracting other financial institutions to come back to the Korean market. I think that would really help Korea to catapult it back to the leading post. So I think this is where Citi is also looking at on a ESG related financing. And a lot of us is only talking about environment. We have forgotten about social and also governance. These are all coming hand in hand, because without social, the environment might have social. I think that should be a collective thinking, and rather than thinking at one point, otherwise we'll be falling back into the same situation that we're all doing our own things, not talking. So I hope that is this is what I wanted to share with everyone here.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And absolutely, James, I think you've hit the hot buttons, which we'll also discuss later on in this panel. If I could move to Byong-Churl. Byong-Churl, he's I have a secret. He's a Korean financier who's going to be the next Avengers movie. He has a secret power that he's invisible. So we'll hear from Byong-Churl.
I'm sorry. So I have some technical problems. So I can see your face and just listen. Okay, so I am the department manager of Marine Finance at Busan Bank. We Busan Bank just start the ship finance business just 3 years ago. So before I joined the B&K Busan Bank, I worked for the K-Shore and K-Aviation in Korea East A's. And after I joined the B&K Busan Bank, and we tried to build up our maritime and the marine assets, including seaports and offshore development, the kind of things. So, but we don't have any much exposure at the maritime industries. But and then our most exposures are focused on the domestic market, not the abroad markets. But we Busan Bank have a strategy to enlarge in the shipping industry. So we are trying to build up our asset related with the maritime and marine industries. So we just think we are just the beginner of the ship finance industry. So but we have a very flexible and very capable man we have. So we try to build up our assets. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And next to Klaus of KfW, I remember when I started my legal career, now this is getting close to over 20 years. Back then, even KfW started to be very active, and they've always been active, and year in and year out, just like Citi and SocGen. So Klaus, if I could defer to you now.
Thank you very much, everybody, for inviting me, Marine Money, and all the other panelists. It's great to be here again. Unfortunately, still virtual, but yeah, let's see. Hopefully next year we meet in person again. you already said it, the KfW IPEX-Bank has always been active in shipping. It's one of our core industries. Maybe I share a bit of the background just to collect everybody. KfW IPEX is the commercial part of KfW Group, which is a German state-owned promotional bank. And with IPEX, there are about 800 people. I myself with the bank for 14 years. The last 8 years are in shipping and Maritimes, first in Frankfurt, and currently I'm in the Singapore office covering Asia and Pacific. Our portfolio is currently around 16 billion US dollars, which makes us one of the, I think, largest lenders into this industry. Marine Money has all the numbers. I think you can look it up. We have been in this position over the last couple of years. I think a lot of it is driven by cruise, of course, but I think approximately half of it is commercial shipping. And here have been quite active also last year, the year before. So Corona and COVID pandemic slowed it down at the beginning, but as everybody knows, recently the market has just been great for shipping and ship owners. With our government background comes also a political mandate. I just want to share this shortly here in Asia because it's quite important if we do business here. We always need to have a European link if we do business. That means we either have a European owner ordering vessels in Asia, or we have a European charterer, or the vessel itself is built in Europe. And if it's built outside of Europe, you look into the vessel, what kind of supplies, what kind of equipment is on board. And normally we find sufficient equipment, especially when there are high-spec vessels like the Korean yards are specialized and are able to build. So I think our strength is, amongst others, industry knowledge, definitely tailor-made structures for our owner, for our clients and the owners. We can be very competitive when it comes to pricing. We can do long-term if the risk profile is low, as we like it. And we often team up with the other banks like Societe and Citi, and the ECAs, like the Korean, K-Shore, Kexim, and of course all the other European ones, and of course also the Sung-Hwan from China. ESG and green shipping is, I think, next to the political mandate is the other big mandate. I will share a bit more about this later, if you mind, and about our current year or the last years. On the Korean side, I must say Korea has been I think one of the most active growth markets over the last 2 years. We start our journey coming to Asia in Singapore. That's where our office is. Of course, it's, I guess, the most international maritime hub in Asia. So I think it's kind of logical that we started here, making our way via Hong Kong, China, and now we finally established business in Korea, and it's developing well. There are excellent ship owners, and as been said before by Mr. John, it takes a bit of education. It takes a bit of openness to the structures, educate not only us in origination, but also back office, risk management, board members to, okay, this is still shipping, but it's different structures. This is quite established. It works. It works quite well, as you can see with these good companies over there. So we are very much looking forward to continue this journey in Korea to more business. It's definitely on our agenda. It hits our sweet spot in several aspects. I would say it's you have strong and good corporate that provide recourse. You have often European charterers for high-spec vessels like LNG carriers. I think there are several elements that really fit our profile, fit our risk appetite, and I have a good feeling that there will be more to come. Besides Korea, we were quite active in container shipping. I think most of you have read about the green loan for Hapag-Lloyd. We arranged together with BNP and 10 other banks. K-Shore covered great vessels from Korea again. So this was a real highlight of our last year and this year. The green loans second party opinion was provided by DNB. They have an excellent expert desk here in Hamburg and Singapore for this kind of job, and we really loved working with them as they are so knowledgeable, being a classification company as well. So it's been a great project and process. We think we delivered within a couple of weeks. It's been fantastic. besides, maybe another highlight was the E-Flexer for Stena, a European ferry operator ordering in China. Here we had lots of European and German equipment on board, which we could create the link and to provide green infrastructure to Germany. So I think these examples show our flexibility and regards to assets, clients, structures, and roles we can play. Like we always have clients' needs in mind, but also happy to and always open to cooperate with partner banks and yeah, finally deliver the best outcome for everybody, especially the customer.
Yeah, thanks, Klaus. Yeah, that green loan, KfW, I think was at DSME, right? I'm not sure. Maybe James and Gwenael, move next to Gwenael next. I think Citi and SocGen may have also participated. Gwenael, if next for you, SocGen.
Yeah, hi. Thank you. Thanks everyone for inviting me on this panel. Yeah, so we're a French bank, and we've been acting in shipping for several decades now. I think shipping is an area which is definitely of interest. The whole importance of the sector is well acknowledged internally. We are here to finance the real economy, and that's really what we obviously all do in shipping. I would say that we've been active in Asia Pacific for quite a few years now, and Korea has been a very attractive market for us. We've been doing many deals over the past few years. I think the key strength and the key attractiveness of this market for us is really the conservative mindset when it comes to commercial development from the shipping companies in Korea. Historically and still today, we see a lot of projects being done with reputable counterparties, long-term project contracts in the background, and that's really something that is attractive to us. Korea is therefore one of our big markets. In Asia Pacific, we're also very active in Greater China, so China, Hong Kong, and the rest of Southeast Asia is also an important market for us. We're quite asset agnostic. I mean, we work on container ships, bulkers, tankers, LNG carriers. I would say that we're primarily corporate and relationship driven. So we really tend to bank with companies with whom we want to have very long-term relationship and stay there for a while. So we are there to support our clients wherever they go. And here, I can only echo what was said before. The direction that the market is taking internationally is really this environmental turn. ESG for us is also a very important topic. We're one of the co-founders of the Positive Principles with Citi and DNB. We've signed various initiatives like Getting to Zero Coalition, the Call for Action for shipping decarbonization just ahead of the COP26 as well, and I think quite a number of banks are in there. So the whole concept of energy and environmental transition is very important. I mean, it's not just a shipping aspect, but also, I would say, a bank-wide aspect for us. It's something that cascades to our project finance team, aviation, and of course, shipping is also impacted by that. So what does it mean in practice for us? It does mean that there is an increased focus and scrutiny on the environmental aspects of our project, meaning that we have to look at the assets we finance, whether they are carbon efficient or not. So that's one of the key due diligence point we start with. So of course, as any financier today, we'd like to finance fully green assets, but they're not there yet. So we really focus on assets which are future-proofed against future regulations and different technological evolutions. That's one part. But one message as well that I'd like to convey to the audience is that even though some assets may not be carbon efficient, but it's not necessarily a deal breaker for us. What really matters is the corporate mindset behind. What is the corporate doing to try and improve its own carbon footprint? What kind of targets is it setting itself, and the necessary means that it is implementing internally and externally to reach those ambitious targets. And I think that here, echoing what James was saying before, we do find that Asia is a bit lagging behind. You know, Southeast Asia is probably a bit more advanced, in fact, than the rest of Asia. Japan is also a bit more advanced, but Korea, we see deals being done for these kind of assets, but I would say it's more on an opportunistic basis. And I think that as an international lender, having a more systematically embedded ESG thinking in, you know, the business model and the corporate strategy is something that we would very much welcome. And I mean, of course, it's also part of our educational process. So we are going hand in hand with our customers there. But I think that's one of the key turn that the Korean shipping market will need to take over the coming years if it doesn't want to be disconnected from the rest of the ship financing world.
Thank you, Gwenael. Yeah, that's all very important, really. I echo what you've said. And to Woo-Sung, it's nice to have you. You know, you used to be an ex-banker at a Japanese bank, and I think it's been now 6 years when I finally asked you to participate in a couple of Marine Money Korea forums on with KTB Asset Management. I think of the 6 panelists, your institution. I think over the 6 years that you've been there, it's been a great job from your end, but there may be some audience that may not clearly know KTB Asset Management's position and role and platform in shipping. So I'll leave that to you.
Thank you, Mr. Choi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So thank you for kind introduction of myself and then KTB Asset Management. As you know, I left the banks 5 years ago, and then set up the global IB division in KTB Asset Management. KTB Asset Management is mainly focused on alternative investment area, and we are also mainly focusing on not only domestic but also international alternative asset. But based on my career background, I'm more has been focusing on build up the good sizable good portfolio in the maritime sector. So as you can see, our track record since last 5 years, I built up some diversified shipping sector as well as maritime infrastructure sector. So when I started from the Korean capital market, still Korean institutional investor, they have a negative view on the some maritime sector due to the bad memories of before global crisis. So they are very hard to introduce very good, high quality of shipping and maritime investment opportunity into the Korean capital market. However, I also at the same time as a newcomer, it was quite hard to compete with the existing player and asset manager or junior loan player. Also at the time, Korean sovereign institution, financial institution, they are very aggressively expand their presence in Korean, not only junior but also ship finance market. So in order to develop the new market, I decided to introduce global investment opportunity in maritime sector. At that time, I closely discussed with Korean sovereign institution as well as Korean private institutional investor. So I has been trying to deliver competitive liquidity and capital to the global maritime industry in combination with sovereign and private some capital. So as you can see in my track record, especially in this year, it was quite hard to pursue on the global project due to the COVID-19 issue last year. However, we physically recognize release of such a manner, and then Korean institutional investor, Korean capital money, they have some very strong demand to make some overseas investment. Even though they are still, I cannot say that they have a very sophisticated understanding of the maritime sector. However, as long as underlying asset is some solid and it is provide the solid cash flow as well as with a strong counterparty, they are eager to participate in some international transaction. So we close the corporate financing transaction as well as structured finance transaction in the bulk terminal in Europe as well as in the US. Also, very recently we closed LNG tanker mezzanine transaction. We successfully invited two Korean institutional investors. They provide a very attractive priced mezzanine piece with more than 10 years long-term financing. So I would like to say to the global maritime finance, shipping finance player, in Korea, we have very competitive the capital who are willing to participate in the international transaction. In terms of our strength point is we can provide relatively long-term financing to the shipping market as long as there is a strong some cash flow and good profile of the debt. So in more detail in junior loan transaction, it was the first time for the Korean capital market to participate in French tax basis shipping finance transaction. It was quite painful process to make provide more solid understanding of a French tax scheme, as well as we went through some very complicated documentation process. So I think KTB is very limited number of asset manager who can handle this kind of the international documentation in the maritime sector, as well as when we pursue on the transaction, we trying to provide very comprehensive analysis and then the investment rationale based on the very deep research, deep analysis of entire value chain as well as industry. So also why such a vessel is core and strategy important to some sponsor and some country and off-take or something like that. So I think KTB would like to pursue this kind of international transaction with all your guys, especially with international shipping banks, as well as the arranger and the ship owner going forward. So I think, yeah, we have also we have a close relationship and then good track record with the Korean sovereign financial institution. They are one of our main some liquidity provider in Korean domestic market, and some of them they are also interested in participating in international transaction. So we can arrange and we can coordinate such a institution and provide some competitive capital to the global maritime industry.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sung. I'm sure it's not the case for Gwenael, but yes, for me, the French tax lease is complicated. And also, the last 5 years, you've been very active with KTB Asset Management. if we can move now to what you and your institutions, and I think most of you have already covered it already, part of it, the deal structuring. And later they'll be talking about the ESG green financing platforms are. However, first, if we can discuss what type of structuring and any new, from the usual vanilla general like terms and conditions you and your institutions may have implemented recently, and if available, as to pricing you've been working on, and really at the end of the day, what needs to be done to work with and to offer. So if I could go back to start off with James.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
You notice that we have been quite quiet in the Korean market over the last few years, not because we have to restructure our portfolio at all. We actually had no restructuring because the exposure wasn't there. Because we find that the Korean market is relatively aggressive comparing to the international shipping markets, where it's nice to have a very robust junior lenders readily available to the ship owners, but that would also exacerbate any reckless investment. And even with the long-term cash flow, you just kick can to the alleyway. Because what we, as a lenders, I always said that we only earn 1 or 2% as margin, but when it comes to losing our ships, we're actually paying into the equity. If a shipping company actually is making money, particularly in the last few years with or without a subsidy, they should be paying back to their shareholders. Particularly, you can see that in the share markets. Most of the shipping company is trading above premium at 70 to 80%, and a lot of capital market issuance that we see. So we have not been really taking our clients to use our loan book. Instead, we see that there's a capital investor looking into shipping company who is in advanced stage or even have the roadmap of driving green ships. From what I hear, that if the Korean institutions are so supporting to the industry and want Korea to be back to the leading, I think, in fact, like what Gwenael said, that embed the ESG, then you will be really controlling any excessive investment into ships that will create another down cycle, right? I think that would be more sustainable rather than just providing liquidity, because I think the first crisis that we had in the 80s or 90s was because too much liquidity in the market. I think shipping company, whoever survived now, should have made amass a lot of liquidity. At the same time, we are bracing for the new change of technology. There's no new technology. There's no new green energy right now. That means companies should have the capability to reserve enough equity for the future capex. Everything is transitional. Not everyone is like Mars, right? They would have enough ammunition to really work with methanol, with a known technology, with the engine developers to develop for their own fleet. It's just how we're going to scale it up. I read an article about Korea is working with Lotte Energy, Hyundai on ammonia. I believe it's ammonia. I think it's good to develop that. However, if that can be embedded in all this financing, whether it's junior, senior, I think that would help accelerate this industry into a much greener space. I think one thing about shipping this time in COVID-19 that we are winning over the other industry because we move goods when everything is disruption. I think it is the very first time every shipping stakeholders is looking into reducing carbon, and I think financiers should be part of that. Make it so that we won't be driving down the pricing. We're in fact creating higher barrier of entries that will actually protect those efficient, strong shipping company, and that will be more sustainable. And also, it's not about churning more deals and building up in such a short period of time, because we are talking about limited resources, cannot be sustained if we continue to have such a double-digit growth rate. So we needed to brace as a slower growth, reasonable return, but then with priority objectives such as ESG, because we're toward 2030, and Korea has a very strong commitment in that. If the finance sector could also help into this, I think that would be beneficial to everyone in here. So to tell you that we have been spending the whole year and next year advising clients on the ESG roadmap, helping them out to be able to get into this space, then I think it will become more sustainable than us just only providing our balance sheet to put on asset that might just only be transitionary.
Yeah. Thank you so much, James, for that. And I'll just continue with the international financiers. Over to Klaus.
Yeah, I mean, you asked, has there been anything out of the plain vanilla structures? I mean, I think the plain vanilla has been is there for a reason. It is working well. It is established. So of course we are looking for the good corporates. We're looking for the good, strong, solid cash flows from charterers and so on. And we always have to keep in mind, okay, this has to be marketable on the loan markets, and it has, like, especially as an international bank, okay, does the structure, does the terms comply with all the regulation and KYC that's coming in more and more. That's my experience. I guess you share this experience. So this is the structures we face, and I think the new element, I think it has been mentioned before, yeah, by everybody, especially James just now, is the ESG topic. It's might be repetitive, but yeah, it's becoming more and more relevant. Investors, stakeholders demand green business models, not only from shipping bank, but also like the Amazons and IKEAs who made the news recently, but also from banks. The ECB, for example, is conducting a climate risk stress test in 2022 next year, challenging and testing the resilience of banks with regards to climate risk. So we at KfW, we believe that we see ourselves as a transformative bank transformative promotional bank, helping and supporting our clients on this transformation process. And doing this, we're currently running this ESG project internally. We call it the roadmap to sustainable finance, and it takes the UN sustainability development goals, like the colorful tiles we all know, puts them down onto bank's activities level, and then finally to impact measurement going forward. So that means for us in shipping, we have sector guidelines, and we will go, as of now, or we started last year or this year officially, putting every new business on the AED measurements. Look, okay, is this in line with the Paris Agreement of going down to zero in 2050? And this is our commitment, and this will, as James just said, this will create, I think, entry barriers or market entry restrictions to owners and borrowers that are not complying or not able to reach for these ESG standards that our international banks are, I think, more and more are demanding, and not because they want to, but of course they want to, but also this is the general development of, I think, all industries, not only banking and shipping. Everybody is putting more and more focus on it, and that's why I think this will bring them the largest change and transformation we have seen. I think this is the greatest challenge of society and economy, to how to manage and how to solve this climate and crisis. Yeah.
No, thank you for that, Klaus. Yeah, first of all, I must apologize because I'm still in that old-fashioned model of raising queries where, okay, I'll have ESG on the separate side, and we'll talk about that later, but it's so intertwined. So let's go that soon. But still, completely agree, and
I mean, it's not. Yeah, maybe it's not the ESG products. I don't know. Maybe I want to hear my colleagues here on the panel. It's not like we are pushing it towards the customer. It's the other way around as well. Like it's a mutual endeavor. Like they're asking, okay, what can we do? What can we do to make this a sustainability linked loan or a green loan? Like what we want to participate, we want to contribute. It's not like this is forcing anyone. It's really push and pull at the same time.
Yeah. And over to you, Gwenael.
Yeah, so I don't want to preempt your questions on ESG later on, but just in case I forget, yeah, I agree with everything that's been said by James and Klaus. It's all very relevant, and I covered the fact that it's one of our key due diligence points, both on the asset but also on the corporate and transaction and so on. The extra point I wanted to make was that if we think that as of today it's a difficult thing to comply with, then I think we have to be prepared for something which is going to get much tougher, because the overall perception in the market is that the shipping industry is actually under-regulated when it comes from an environmental perspective. So yeah, we need to be prepared for that. Both the banks, which means that the climate alignment of our portfolio is probably going to be bad for quite a few years, especially if the targets become more and more stringent, but also the owners. And I think that there's going to be more and more pressure there. In terms of structuring, I think for us, quite similar to my colleagues here, we're very much focused on strong corporates, whether that's directly the owner or through very long-term cash flow coverage from solid charter contracts with reputable investment-grade counterparties. And I think that's been one of the key features of the Korean market for quite a while, and which has made it very attractive from our perspective as international lender, but which has also allowed to have this, probably a bit higher leverage type of structures which we've seen compared to the rest of Asia. It's true that when you have a 15 or 20-year contract, you can probably gear up 80 to 90% of your assets, and I think we've been fine with that, and we're still fine with that when you can demonstrate that you have that kind of very solid contract in the background. Where I think the world is moving a bit is that charters have been getting shorter and shorter, and that's been true for quite a few years already, whether that's LNG tankers, but also bulkers, especially when you contract with international charterers. I would say that when you have a Korea Inc. type of transaction with a Korean owner and a Korean charterer, it's still very much old style 20-year contract, 15-year contract, which is great. But when you have a Korean owner and an international charterer, charters are more in the range of 5, 7, 10 years. And then that begs the question, do those deals support the same type of leverage that we've seen in the past? And I think we haven't come with a definitive answer yet, but I think it will create a few issues in a few years when there are some balloons to be refinanced, some junior debts to be refinanced, when there is no further contract on these assets. And I think it's probably something that we as an international lender, we bear in mind when we enter into transactions with our clients. But it's also something that, again, we were talking about the specificities about the Korean ship finance market versus the rest of the international or Asian ship finance market. Again, there is some form of disconnect that is arising, and whether that's sustainable in the long term, I'm not entirely sure.
Thanks, Gwenael.
Sung-Hwan, if I may only add on one particular part, that a lot of non-Korean shipping company, they might not have long-term contract, but they're able to get investment grade to get bond for 20 years. Then that already make a very stark comparison between these two situations in here, right? You're basically putting the burden to the corporate to provide a long-term charter. So eventually you will cause the corporate who chartering it become not competitive. Even the Japanese owners nowadays are shortening their charter to their own Japanese operators. And you will see that the market has really moved long time ago. I think in Korea, they're still looking at asset-based financing rather than looking at corporate finance-based financing. That's why you have got this stable charter BB6B structure in the Korea, specifically in the Korea, and that is remote, basically is completely remote to the bankruptcy. So that's why a lot of banks were going through restructuring in the last few years. So basically, there's not much change if you're talking about even having other investors looking into it or capital market, but it is not international competitive at all. And ultimately, it will get back to the Korean investors.
Right, absolutely. Thank you for that insight, James. Now, just taking it from the Korean financiers, I'll start with Jun-Hyung.
Okay, yeah, thanks for a lot of interest and concern about Korean shipping industry. Yeah, I understand what you mean. So it's actually quite mixed. We Korean shipping industry suffered from some the bankruptcies. So that's why even local financiers, they very keen on then how to manage their risk. So that may too much focus on the long-term employment. So now no Korean shipping companies order. Then I haven't seen the spot ordering recently. So almost 99% of order is based on the long-term charter, either international or it's local. So that means it's a cash flow. They generate cash flow. Based on that, they can raise a higher leverage, senior together with the junior, 90%, whatever. Then it will affect their balance sheet. As you mentioned, it's a long-term sustainability of the company. Is it good or bad? It's difficult to judge. But that's what's happening in Korean shipping industry. That may be different trend from international. So that is it's an issue we have to address. Yeah, but that is very complicated and then not easy. So yeah, and then coming back to ESG, KIAMCO is an asset management company. We don't have our own fund. We set a fund and we raise a fund from Korean capital market. So we deal with a lot of Korean institutional investors. Some of them are government agencies. Many are commercial. At the moment, commercial investors. It's very difficult to draw attention from commercial investors, even with the Korean project. So many projects supported by the government agencies. That's why coming back. Then those government agencies also focus on the cash flow. They willing to support employ the vessels. That is all interlinked. So that all also impacted the balance sheet. So then we have to address this. We need a big discussion. It's government agencies, and then capital market. Yeah, that's true. But my concern is, my interest is that even though how to utilize Korean capital market is getting bigger and bigger. So we saw 3 years ago, it's alternative investment, outbound alternative investment from Korean capital market overnumbered internal domestic alternative investment. It means there is a huge demand for the project outside Korea from Korean capital market. So I want to utilize a piece of a pie. Money goes towards maritime sector. So then conventional shipping. I think it's too early to deal with the commercial investors Korea. But if we link with the ESG or environmental issue, those guys may be interested. So maybe hydrogen carriers. Maybe it will take some time, but that kind of thing, or offshore wind power or installation. Yeah, that kind of it's a bit. It's shipping or it's renewable. I don't know, but that kind of we need a color to make it look like more green. Then I think Korean investors will listen. Cause we see the newspaper almost every day. We have a ESG articles on the headline. Almost every newspaper. Cause those ESG concern. It's very, very high. It's partly driven by government promotion, or partly due to this pandemic, COVID. The people and the Korean, it also a lot of the awareness of the importance of environment. So I think the Korean capital market is moving towards it intentionally or unintentionally. We are giving more focus on ESG concerns.
Yeah. Thank you, Jung. Yeah, that's a lot of stuff on the plate for the Korean shipping market. For Busan Bank, Byong-Churl, if you could mention some stuff.
Okay, ESG is one of the very hot topic these days, and we also have some great impact from the ESG. The Busan Bank declared the coal finance some month ago. So we don't have any so the transaction these days coal-related the businesses. So that means that coal transport vessels is not our coverage. So, and then a lot of the Korean the bulk carrier long-term employment is related with the coal transportation to the power station. So that means that we lost a lot of business opportunities in the bulk carrier business these days. So, and I concerned about the two sides of the things regarding the ESG. The first one is the vessel ownership structures as a change shift, and the other one is the stranded asset risk. I mean, at present the fleet, lots of the legacy fleets have the risk to be a stranded asset. So if they do not meet the requirement from the IMO, the carbon emission standard, they will be scrapped or demolished. So I think that is the one of the biggest risks for the legacy fleets related with the ESG, and the other one is the future vessel ownership structure. So I think the transition to carbon neutrality could be a game changer of the future ship owning landscape. In order to meet IMO carbon emission target, most of existing fleet would become the stranded asset, and they should be upgraded or substituted with zero carbon vessel. That means the ship owners should prepare large-scale fleet renewal programs, which cost much more than the legacy vessels. So their fundraising capacity and capability will be the key for their sustainability. I think a handful of ship owners which have large-scale fundraising capacity can afford to renew their fleet according to IMO schedule. That means a small number of the ship owners will dominate the fleet owning landscape. Yeah. So I'm very concerned about the small and medium-sized shipping companies in Korea. So they are always controversial about their the sustainability of the SME shipping companies in Korea. So yes, according to ESG, I have a very concerned about two things I mentioned. So we are very careful watch what is going on the Korean the shipping companies. So and then the Busan Bank is very focused on the cash flow basis transactions and not the corporate basis transactions. So we want the BPC-HP transactions because it can be removed from the mother company's credibility. So if the BPC-HP the projects have the enough cash flow from their long-term employment, they can be sustainable. So we are nowadays we are more careful about the long-term cash flow generation capability. So that is our focus on these days of the Korean shipping market.
Okay, yeah, thank you for that, Byong-Churl. And finally, to Woo-Sung, I'll let you have your stab on ESG from KTB Asset Management. Really, at the end of the day, Woo-Sung, is like for KTB Asset Management and yourself, you know, what have you taken account in more of your lending decision factoring linking with ESG criteria?
Regarding the ESG financing, recently I have some case that some coal transportation bulk carrier, one of a Korean domestic company trying to raise a fund, but it is quite hard to raise a fund from the Korean capital market from Korean institutional investor because Korean capital market now rapidly adopted such a ESG protocol. Even though there is no definite, some very clear guideline, however, internally they decide to not to support coal-fired infrastructure transaction as well as any coal-related thing. They are now following with the international standard. So that's why it's in such a background, Korean capital market. In consideration of a Korean capital market appetite, we are now more focusing on the new building project, which are equipped with environment-friendly equipment rather than second-hand transaction. So it is very hard to find second-hand some refinancing or financing transaction with the Korean capital market. And in case of that's why I think in LNG tanker and the high specification of tankers, LNG fueled the bulk carrier or container ship, that is one kind of a target asset we are looking at this moment. And then one thing Mr. Jun or Mr. An already mentioned, still Korean capital market not so keen to the asset risk. We are more keen to the cash flow basis transaction. So normally in case of international the debt investment opportunity, we are looking at the term loan B market because relatively the pricing wise it is relatively higher than some typical senior loan or typical senior loan market. So I think we applied such some guideline or criteria to the international junior market as well. But if there is a long-term employment and then tailor-made cash flow, the repayment profile, as we mentioned, we are relatively flexible to extend our maturity more than 10 years. So that is, I believe, the most competitive edge in Korean capital market in the shipping finance industry.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Usam. I do see Kevin.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm afraid we're running out of time, so I'll just come in now. We've had a few questions from the audience. I mean, most of it, unsurprisingly, is kind of ESG related. So I'll just sort of amalgamate the questions. I mean, the one that's being asked most, I guess, is, you know, and perhaps I can address it to James and Gwenael, because you're founding signatories of the Poseidon Principles. I mean, going forward, I mean, is there going to be a case of, you know, when you're taking the ESG ratings of shipping companies into account and you're now monitoring them and you'll be able to compare them year on year and everything else, going forward, is it going to be a case of sort of rewarding the companies who do well and possibly penalizing somehow or other the companies who do less well? Or is it just a matter of gathering this information or actually going to implement decisions based on this information, James?
It's already reflecting in the capital market that there will be incentive given those shipping companies have a roadmap if they're able to achieve certain KPIs with regard to the ESI. And from my perspective, I emphasize it a lot for those companies who already have the mindset and vision of the driving the ESG, not just on the E, but also S. Then I will be focusing more on my time and capital to those companies to help them achieve that faster. Because shipping tends to be followers, particularly what I see in Asia. I know that it could be quite challenging to change. But I think if we are giving this chance, I think I always mention that I don't have any kids. We all assume there'll be 2030. What happens if there's no 2030? So long you can be responsible to your own next of kin, I think do it.
Okay, thank you. Gwenael?
Maybe, yeah. So for us, again, President Principles is a relatively young initiative. You know, when you're looking at it, it was set up 3 years ago, and I think we're still in the process where we're collecting information. But yes, there is a growing pressure to over time redistribute the capital allocation within the banks to those who are good performers in priority. But what I would like to say is that it's not something that's going to happen overnight, of course, and on our side in Societe Generale, we're very much focused on the transition path. You know, again, there is no green asset as of today, but what really matters is the corporate mindset of the corporate entities we deal with, taking the right ambitions, the right steps to show that they will transition their business towards more and more carbon efficient operations and of course, less and less carbon issuance. So, in short, yes, as of today, as James mentioned, there are some incentives and penalties reflected in some sustainability-linked loans, and we've done quite a few of them actually on our side as well. But I think, you know, it's going to reach a point where the penalties and the rewards are going to be much more black and white. You know, I don't know how long it will take, but you know, ultimately, I wouldn't discount that, you know, by the end of the decade, people just say, yes, I lend to you, no, I don't lend to you. And that's where the mechanism will be even more stringent.
Okay, thank you very much.
More too, I think sooner or later, there'll be clauses into shipping finance. Say dry bulk would forbid them from moving coal, pretty much a sanction clause. We're talking about fossil fuel now in the COP26. Originally, we talked about coal, now we talk about fossil fuel and even LNG. So I believe that those on the other side might be waiting and see. My concern will be there's not much time for them to see, and then already most of the capital directed to those companies have the roadmap, like Gwenael said, that is the mindset of that.
Yeah, very good, thank you. Okay, another issue that has come in. I mean, it's very clear from the discussion, and we all know that, you know, shipping is not an easy place to lend to or to invest into, and in actual fact, only modest returns are giving from shipping over a long-term period. I mean, now, just at the current moment, these markets are pretty good for most sectors, but we all know it's not going to last and things will normalize at some point. And obviously, banks and investors have to choose shipping amongst all other industries. I mean, why do shipping? Why not do everything else? So the question is, how can we convince investors that shipping is a decent place to invest? And how do we comfort banks that it's a good place to lend? I don't know, Klaus, I don't know, maybe you'd like to sort of take a stab at that one?
That's okay, yeah, sure. It's a bit of a generic question, but I don't have the feeling that we have to convince anybody at the moment to invest in shipping. If you look at the stock market, if you look at the pricings,
but did you have to convince them? Did you have to convince them 2 years ago, however?
Yeah, 2 years ago it was a different story, definitely, and I'm afraid it will be a different story in 2 years down the road. But yeah, how to convince? We believe in shipping. We've been there as from the beginning, since KfW started. I think what is changing, I think, over the decades is that there's a certain consolidation process. I think we can see that in containers very well, that kind of developed the industry towards more more stable waters. Like how they manage the COVID crisis in the beginning and how they're now coming out of it, I think would not have happened 10 years ago the same way. So I think there might be similar tendencies in other industries. So I think that the stability has improved. So maybe that's an aspect for investors and our investors to look at. Okay, how has it developed? It's not as cyclical as it used to be. Yeah, that's my take on that at the moment, I think.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. And Mr. John, from a Korean sort of perspective, I mean, how? Yes. I know you've mentioned several times you need to educate your investors a bit more, but how do you convince them that it's safe and it's solid and it's sustainable?
Yeah, of course, I'm in a good position because I'm covering overseas investment in general. So I have a portfolio with energy infrastructure, so I can compare easily what is appetite from Korean investors and their view on shipping. So it's most of Korean institutional investors, they invest overseas transaction based on cash flow. They are not equity investor, they are mezzanine investors. So they chase a certain yield, say between 5%, 6% sort of. They're not pursuing it 10 plus equity, pure equity type. Then it's shipping. It's it's some junior they can satisfy that, but they still see compared to other energy transaction, infrastructure transaction, they can find it's an opportunity with good off-takers or sometimes the government related, overseas government related. So it's hey, we have this kind of alternative. Then why I have to put our money in shipping? And the question is they see the shipping is volatile, and that they learn the lesson through the investment in shipping, Korean shipping company. We saw three major some difficulties, including Hanjin. So it's they see that shipping is too cyclical, and then it's volatile. So it's I think it's they haven't convinced themselves to find a good reason why to put the money in shipping compared to other sector. But I think it's I think time goes by. We spend more time in the asset management company and myself, and then I think we have to knock the door more hardly. Then, yeah, it'll open sometime. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Okay, excellent. So I think we're out of time. We've had an excellent discussion. Thank you all very much. Thank you, SD, for moderating.
If I could just,
go on. You go on.
Say one last thing. I want to leave. I want to leave with a Korean proverb. And if marine money is the house of philosophy, the Korean proverb is wise men philosophize as the fools live on. And I think from these discussions, you guys, each of you and your institutions are financier philosophers. And with having said that, I want to again thank you to my panelists and to the audience and to Marine Money. And I look forward to seeing you all next year at Paradise Hotel, and have a very good, successful year end, and be safe to all.
Thank you. Thank you, SD. Thank you very much to all of you for a great panel. Thank you. That's the end of our conference for this year. As SD says, we definitely look forward to being in Busan with all of you face to face next year. Thank you to our sponsors. And for now, goodbye. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.